Hi, everybody.
Good.
Thanks so much. Hi, Jenny Davis. I'm the Arizona Program Manager for the National Forest Foundation. And I'll turn it to Shelly.
I'm Shelly Basemeyer. I'm the Program Director for the Central Arizona Conservation Alliance out of the Desert Botanical Garden. Shall we jump into it? So we wrote up a quick roadmap. This is what we're gonna talk about today about Sonoran insiders, just so you all know when it's gonna end, and we'll get to the Q&A. We've all seen the news reports about social media influencers and their perception and what can happen when things go wrong, as we can see here. But the question for Sonoran insiders was, how can we harness influencers for good? And we've leveraged a group for their care for the environment and kind of combined it with education and training to make them ambassadors for responsible recreation, conservation, and good stewardship of natural areas. And it's a great peer-to-peer peer communication network with them involved versus just agency or organization to the public. So here you can kind of see when we combine our powers on social media, you have the combined reach of the influencers and the agency or organization, and it's much greater than the parts. US or Tonto has a really strong number of followers, but then you have Bonita here who has 23,000. And the combination of all of us together, we can get a much farther reaching message. We have a more diverse audience with them involved. Yes, so these are the 3 of our most followed ambassadors in the group. So Instagram was selected because it strikes a really strong balance between visual and written storytelling. It's one of the most used of the social media platforms. And it has a huge impact on public lands and natural open spaces globally, as we saw back with the negative news reports. There's a lot of positive that can be done on this platform. And it still remains one of the most popular social media platforms. It has about 2 billion monthly users, and that's been really consistent over the past 5 years. So a little bit about the program.
So our mission for the program is to bridge the knowledge gap between the public and outdoor recreation and conservation professionals. Like Shelly was saying earlier, we have this greater reach combined, and a lot of people, when they hear things come out from agencies, they can roll their eyes and be like, oh, well, I'm not listening to the Forest Service or whatever it is. So peer-to-peer being that communication platform where we can leverage their influence and share responsible outdoor recreation messaging and conservation messaging across Arizona. And we work with really passionate members of the community. Our influencers and ambassadors are amazing, and they help us raise awareness on local recreation, conservation, and environmental topics, and encourage stewardship and conservation action. And we developed a set of ethics akin to leave no trace principles. Here in Arizona, we have Appreciate AZ, so we also have a set of those ethics. But for the program itself, we settled on these 6 of recreate responsibly, be a good steward, be safe outdoors, use technology responsibly, build an inclusive outdoors, and respect ancestral lands. So the program started in 2019 as a conversation over coffee and an idea between Central Arizona Conservation Alliance, the National Forest Foundation, and Tonto National Forest here in Arizona. And again, it was this: how do we reach a broader audience with responsible recreation conservation messaging? What are ways, that we can really expand our reach and get the messaging out there? And so the program started with recruiting ambassadors. I believe there were 8 or 9 original ambassadors that we sent messaging out to, and we were like, hey, we're starting this program. Would you like to be a part of this? And looked at, folks that already had interest in the outdoors, that were posting about things in line with what we were looking for. And most of those ambassadors are still with the program today, which is really cool. And the way it works is we post insider experiences, and they're like VIP behind the scenes activities that the public doesn't really get a chance to do. So really fun stuff. And I'll talk about this slide and what we're doing in these a little bit later. But we host these experiences where we talk to them about, again, recreation, service opportunities, educational talks, focused on stewardship of Arizona's natural spaces, right? And then the ambassadors take what they've learned at these events and share it with their followers on social media. So while we're hosting the event, they're posting to their stories, talking about what we're doing, all that kind of stuff. And Shelly, I'll talk a little bit about briefs, where we provide them with language. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And the majority of these events are hosted collaboratively with program partners and outside collaborators. So the ambassadors get this really cool exposure to land managers, scientists, conservationists, all kinds of folks in the field. And the examples in this slide on the left, we did a trail day with Tonto National Forest and Wild Arizona, where we got rid of half of a mile of social trails. That was a really fun day and did that together. Here kayaking, we do a Salt River paddle every year down the Salt River. And we remove invasive apple snail eggs, and that contributes to Tonto National Forest's invasive species efforts there. And then top right is an event that Casca helped host and held at Desert Botanical Garden, where they had a chance to learn about cactus poaching, which was something they hadn't really been exposed to before. They were really interested in that. So again, playing into that conservation aspect, conservation of cactus, and also the seed lab we got to explore and see that Steve Blackwell in that photo, who does amazing work with taking photos of seeds. So they got to see basically his artwork at that trip too, which was really cool. And then bottom right is a collaborative day with Arizona State Parks and Trails, one of our partners, where we did some trail clearing and helped restore and clean up Ranch House at Oracle State Park, which is really great. We've done other events like non-eagle feather repository at Liberty Wildlife. It's always a tongue twister, and they got to do things like that. So really fun, engaging events that we host with them. And then for growth and metrics, we're up to 8 partners in the program, and we have 16 current ambassadors. I just did this math the other day and crunched the numbers. We are reaching 30.2K people. We reached that many people in 2024. And reach, for folks that don't speak social media speak, is the total number of unique users who saw our content at least once. So the reach could be even greater than that with repeated exposure, but this is at least people that have seen our content at least once. And then combined with ourselves and the ambassadors, we have a total following of 100K people, and about 83 people a day see our posts, which is pretty cool. And then in the bottom, the number of followers is steadily increasing every year, which is pretty cool. We're almost up to, I think, 1,600 on our account alone. And so, yeah, with the combined reach of the ambassadors is really exciting. And these are our current partners in the program. Again, so grateful for program partners. This is how we get the work done and how we all share capacity and resources to host events and provide things for the ambassadors. And this is our set of influencers. These are our current program ambassadors. Really love this group of folks, lots of mix of interests. Some are hikers, some are birders. We have hunters and anglers, climbers, lots of interest in different backgrounds, which was really great. And I'll turn it over to Shelly for some insights.
Yeah, so like anything, you don't want to unleash a bunch of people to spread the word about something without some guidance when they aren't within the agency or organization. So we provide the ambassadors with briefs for every event that they attend, and it'll give them particular language to use, sometimes things to avoid, and then also like a key message and how they or people can help. And we work with each of the different locations or, partner agency that's kind of coming in to help us host these things to make sure that what they want communicated is communicated. So for things like we went to a urban farm that's run by the International Rescue Committee. So it's all refugees, on little plots farming food for themselves and their families and their neighborhoods. And they helped us by providing what they want shared out to the public and what can help them and help their mission and how other people can get involved and support it as well. So we do this for each of the different events that we do, so that there's consistent messaging, but also, what gets out there is what needs to get out there.
Another thing that's worked really well in the program are collaborative posts, shared messaging, and campaigns. So on Instagram, you can do collaborative posts with multiple people or organizations, and that's been really amazing to see the results of that. This first photo on the left was one of our ambassadors who collaboratively posted with us and Kazka for StinkNet. And it was incredible to see the reactions to this post. There are 52 comments on here of people sharing how much they learned and had no idea what invasive StinkNet was. So really cool to be able to reach folks outside of like the normal circles that like, oh, I already know what StinkNet is. Like reaching the people that don't already know is such a great thing. And it was so cool to see that interaction on that post. And then in that same one, Pasca provided an identification guide and like about StinkNet, so that resources was able to be shared in that post from Benita to a really wide audience, which was great. In the middle here, we did a National Wildfire Awareness Week campaign, and one of our ambassadors shared messaging around National Wildfire Awareness Week, and that post itself had over 250 likes during that week, which was really incredible. So raising awareness for wildfire safety. And then another thing is shared messaging. So we also can work with partners to amplify messaging and campaigns. And so this example on the right is the Arizona State Parks Trails Plan survey. So we were able to amplify that on our account and with the ambassadors to get more people to take that trail survey, which was really helpful.
So for program assessments, we do annual surveys of the ambassadors to ask them, how things are going, what their impressions are, all that jazz. This particular bar chart here is about what they enjoy most about the Sonoran Insiders program. And I'm sorry that these things ended up really small, but you have things like the insider experiences, learning about responsible recreation and conservation. These are small for me too, sorry. Using what they learned to make an impact.
Promotion and collaboration on social media, and then staying in the know about volunteer opportunities.
Yeah, and there's always an other option because we can't cover everything. And I really liked this one where one of the ambassadors said, I'm very interested in using my background in photojournalism to help our efforts on larger scales when applicable, and pitching to big outlets as we lead by example for what conservation can look like. In addition to these annual surveys of the ambassadors, we also put out an annual report. This is one page from it from 2023. And we include in that things like where they went and what they did, but also a lot of the social media metrics that we pull for every year so that we can look year over year and show what we've done. This is also super helpful when pursuing any sort of funding, because then we have an ongoing record and can show growth, can show progress and successes. And then lastly, it's also really critical to have open communication between the ambassadors and the agency. So we have annual meetings with everybody so we can make sure that everybody can sit around a table, or if absolutely necessary, a Zoom, and we all know what's going on, can answer questions from the ambassadors, can find out how they're feeling and give them the opportunity to talk and say things that we might not get in a survey. So, and here's some more of the feedback from the annual surveys. So we have information like why they applied and the unique experience that they get, and these insider experiences are really great and they really enjoy them, and they also really want to do their part and to help with the voice that they have. And you can see on the right here what they feel like they're impacting, and they're able to reach into their communities and to help spread the word and this knowledge that they're gaining, and to make sure that it's being amplified. So the real key here is collaboration, not just between the partners and the ambassadors, but amongst the partners too. All of this takes time and energy and a capacity that not everybody has all the time, and not every organization has all the time. So we're able to really support each other and to share resources and cover one another when funding or time or just the ability to do something. And so like in this upper left photo, this was we'd gone to a little bar called Wren House, and they create their own, they are a brewery. There we go. And they had actually collaborated with the Tonto to create a beer to help support Tonto conservation efforts. So we got to go there, and the ambassadors got to have some of this beer. They got to learn about what it was done, but we also brought in another local organization, the White Tank Mountains Conservancy, to talk about the work that they're doing, working with developers to create wildlife corridors in future developments and ensure that there's connectivity for wildlife in the West Valley region. So that was, we're able to supply all of these things by each giving a little piece where we can, when we can. And so bottom right here is another Oracle State Park visit, and that one was a stargazing trip where one of the ambassadors actually ended up hosting for us because he does these stargazing tours frequently, and he's written a book about it, and so he was super excited to be able to share his knowledge with the group. And so there's these opportunities where the organizations are supporting one another. We're also collaborating with the ambassadors, and the ambassadors get these moments to shine as well. I think, was that everything that I covered?
Yeah, I'd say too, we have some swag that we've been able to do for them. I just was wearing my hat today. We have hats and, stickers and buttons and things like that. So we've been able to pool funds to do things like that here and there, or cover ticket costs for things. And another thing I'll add is the ability to share communications. So when an agency or when an organization can't share things out on their social media, we can do that through Sonoran Insiders. And if an organization doesn't have a social media account, if they don't have an Instagram, that's an opportunity for us to be able to share that messaging for them. And the ambassadors can then share as well.
I also want to add one more thing to this too. Through the collaboration, we also have access to so many more partners than we do on our own. So like we were able to bring in White Tank Mountains Conservancy, but the Forest Service is able to bring in this brewery that we don't have a relationship with. And this happens a lot where we can pull on one another's partnerships to help make these things happen. So lessons learned, metrics. Consistent metrics. That's the thing that I think got us in the beginning a little bit. If you do a program like this, identifying which metrics to track from the start is really, really important. And you can add on to it, but having that consistency across reporting is something that is really key to be able to make the year-over-year comparison. For us, number of events, reach, number of followers, and number of ambassadors are a really big one. And for I think reach, we might have lost one of the years it didn't get tracked, and that one was really important for us. So just making sure that those things are, consistently going on, and if you're going to change it, you know exactly why and have a good reason for it. And then making sure that there is a human that can keep up with that is also really, really key. And then if that person leaves, that historic and institutional knowledge gets transferred in some way. And then automation is really key here too. We've been using Hootsuite, but using some sort of automated system to help track like the social media part or any other part of the system is great, because then you don't have to spend as much time when we're all essentially volunteering as part of this effort. Capacity, we have always needed a dedicated social media person and have never had a dedicated social media person for this. It would make everything much easier, but if you have the funding or a really long-term intern that's interested in it, that's a really good way to go. And then engagement with the ambassadors, because our ambassadors are actually all across the state, not just here in the Phoenix area, engaging all of them in one event is really, really difficult. We try and we do our best, but it's not always possible. And then initially for this program, we had people applying, which that's how we have a lot of our current ambassadors, but we found over the past couple of years that changing it to a recruitment actually works a little bit better, because then we can target the folks that we think would be great ambassadors. And I think, do we still have applications up if people want to apply?
Not right now.
Okay.
It's transition.
Oh yeah. So yeah, the recruitment has worked really well. And then never forget to take photos, because if you don't have the photo, it didn't happen. especially when you're dealing with social media. And then finally, being proactive with the ambassador and tuning into to their needs, to their interests and wants is really important, because then you can fine tune the events to what they're going to attend and what they're going to want to talk about on their platforms.
I'll add in too for photos that it's super helpful to have for grant applications, for communications, to garner support for the program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here in this next slide of what's on the horizon. We're really excited, and thinking about what Shelly was just talking about, that we were like, okay, we're struggling to have metrics, the engagement, those kinds of things. What can we do to kind of address that? So we are going to start a responsible recreation field school. And we have been able to do this with funding from Arizona State Parks. We're really excited about that. What we're going to do is, over a course of 3 weekends or so, fully immerse the ambassadors in learning about responsible recreation, and each class across a set of weekends will be based on our set of ethics. And so we've had feedback from the ambassadors about how they, are learning a lot at the events that we've hosted, but they still don't feel confident in talking to the public. They don't feel confident when they've been tabling at things. So this will fully equip them to feel comfortable in their skills, to get out there and really be there in person and talk to folks on the trail or tabling at, like REI or outdoor recreation shops that are local. And so we're really excited about this. We're going to get them wilderness first aid certified. We're going to teach them appreciate AZ principles, leave no trace principles. We'll have a public lands 101 class where they'll learn about the different types of public lands, who manages them, the differences and the rules between different types of managed public lands. And so we're hoping to launch this we are launching this in early April of 2026. So we'll have those classes, and then ambassadors will graduate with all of this knowledge, and we'll have a graduation ceremony. And they are getting really cool swag bags with leave no trace materials and field guides and packed bathroom kits and things like that. And they'll be fully ready to be out there in the world. And we'll do this every year. So we'll continue to build on the program, and we'll have more and more ambassadors in the program to maintain engagement, to be able to actually go out and have an impact in the real world as well as on social media. So through the whole course, they'll post on social media, same kind of idea of what they're learning to reach the public with that. And then we'll have continuing education, sort of in the same vein of what we've already been doing. So after ambassadors graduate, they can then attend the insider experiences and keep learning more deeply about different types of conservation and responsible recreation topics. So we're really excited for it. And that's all we've got. Thank you guys so much. We will take questions.
Thank you so much, Jenny and Shelly.
Hi, thank you for sharing your presentation. It's a lot of great information. And I joined a couple minutes late, so I'm sorry if I missed this, but I was wondering if you could talk about how you do the recruitment. How do you find the people that you're interested in, and are they generally, when you have this program that's pretty well established now, but I'm thinking of, starting something like this or a really scaled down version, how do you get people interested?
Shelly and I were not in the original planning of things, but from what I understand, there was a lot of research done and recommendations of folks. So it helps a lot to know the area that you're in and know folks that have good following on social media. And even if you can get connected with a local influencer and ask for their recommendations, that's really helpful. And initially it was that reaching out and recruiting folks, and then we shifted to an application process. So we would post it, have our partners share it out, share it in their newsletters, things like that, and have people apply to the program. And we learned a lot of lessons through that. Um, We would have folks that, were pretty obviously just looking for more followers that had applied that weren't necessarily like outdoor rec. It would be, someone with a sports car account or something like that. So it wasn't super aligned, but that raised the question of, you want to reach outside of the echo chamber, right? So if someone does have like a cool mix of things, like if they're a fitness influencer and they're outdoorsy, like that could be really cool. So, we've had folks apply that weren't the best fit, that, didn't represent like our ethics online, and, were a little harsh with other folks on social media. So, we're really about education and that kind of, educating with kindness and being thoughtful. But and thinking about starting a program like this, I think as much as you can know about your local community and who is in it already, and reaching out to those folks and leaning on partners again. But Shelly, is there anything else?
Yeah, so we also, now that we have this cohort of ambassadors, we'll always ask them, when it was application, we'd ask them their opinions on the finalists after we had gone through them. And then we'd also get suggestions from them too, sometimes on people to recruit. And as Jenny said, with some of the people that, if we're on the fence or don't maybe know them very well, then we can ask the ambassadors, like, do you have personal interactions with these? Have you worked with them on social media? And they can share stuff with us that will help us better understand this person that we may not have been able to decide on or not really known much about, that sort of thing.
was
Yeah,
on
and you
par, but
can start too by checking your own like volunteers or trail ambassadors and see, are they budding influencers, or do they have like a fairly large following, and maybe start with those folks too.
It's funny, the algorithm will bring things in. So, eventually you'll start seeing folks that are, posting and sharing, and that kind of actually plays into it too. Of, on our Sonoran Insiders account, if we go to explore, we can see like folks that pop up and we're like, oh, this person looks interesting, and reach out and things like that.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was so inspiring. I really enjoyed listening to the program and hearing more about it. I wondered what, it sounds like you guys really take the time to vet your influencers, but I was wondering what if and what happens when they say something that's wrong or post something that's wrong, or worse, like something that's really counter to your messaging and your mission and what you value. How do you handle stuff like that?
We've been lucky.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
haven't. But Shally, I think, or Kazka, I think, was one of the folks that brought to light of having like a disclaimer. So on our website, and when they sign up, it's, hey, their views, because like these are people's personal accounts and they post about all kinds of things. So having a disclaimer of this is not reflective of Sonoran Insiders or the partner organizations is a key thing, because we also work with federal agencies, right? And have to be very mindful of that. I'll turn it to you. I can't think of a time where we've had someone like say something blatantly wrong. There's been like details of things of like, hey, stinknet doesn't grow here, or something very simple. But yeah,
We had somebody apply that we were really struggling with because they had a good following, but some things we didn't agree with. And that was a lot of conversation was with the partners on, not just about this person, but this is a situation we haven't seen. So what do we do? And we didn't come up with a clear plan on that, but I think for something like that, like our current ambassadors, they're really good people. So I think it would be a conversation and then a request for a clarification or just some sort of statement about, oh, I'm sorry, I think this was, incorrect, and here's the correct thing, or, just something. Like a lot of them, I feel like if we sat down and talked to them about why we were troubled about something they posted, they would listen and take that in. I think if they didn't react that way, it would be a more serious conversation after that. But we've been very lucky in who is in the program, I feel like, and we spend a lot of time going through all of their Instagrams and all of their posts and then discussing amongst ourselves before they're added to the program too.
So to your point of that, yes, we spend a whole lot of time up front, which it seems like has paid off for us to not run into those situations later on. And like Shelly said, like we all as partners scroll through the applicants' Instagrams and make sure, and we've had instances of where like, ooh, that's not good. And it can be something like going off trail or, you know, geocaching somewhere they shouldn't be or things like that, which also can present an opportunity. And we've had that conversation of, okay, if we were to invite this person, is that an educational moment, right? Like, is that where we teach them about responsible recreation and bring them in? So we've also thought about that too, but
We've done that with a couple of them too, especially with technology, with drones, like having a conversation. And it's sometimes that like, we don't know, do you have a permit or not? So when bringing them in, we talk to them about their use of, you know, technology or whatever that individual thing is, and then clarify the appropriate process or like the appropriate responsible way to do things if they're not necessarily doing that. And then yeah, teachable moments for everything. And it's worked out so far.
maybe we're jinxing ourselves.
I know.
Thank you so much for your talk today. This was really, really like interesting to learn. It seems like this briefing process is like really key to the success of your program. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what is that process? What does it look like?
Well, I'll start and maybe go some. So the process kind of actually depends, I think, on each event. So sometimes like the one that we posted was a very official looking brief, and sometimes they'll get those when we have, you know, ahead of like a long lead time and very specific things we want. But sometimes like with the Seed Lab and that urban farm one, it's more of a, let's sit down and talk to this person and see, what do you want out? And that becomes a conversation with the ambassadors where then they can learn a little bit more and ask more questions to make sure that they really hone in on their individual posts on what they want the public to know about what they've learned and still keep that key message in there. So we make it flexible in that way so that there's, you know, this ability to change and to adapt to situations.
Like Shelly's saying of depends on the event. It also will have ambassadors support campaigns too. So we have them support National Forest Week or ask them to. And so we'll share like the social media toolkit. And that one's more of like a Word doc that has example posts with example language and like what the theme is for National Forest Week. So if it's a lot of information that won't fit on a nice, clean, cute flyer, a lot of times that turns into a Word doc that we can share with them. And, you know, if we have example photos, we share them with those as well. You know, they didn't have photos of invasive apple snails before they went on those trips. So sharing those with them to be able to post is something else that we do of, you know, sharing images as well.
It sounds like your ambassadors or influencers, that's kind of event based. You coordinate an event through a partner. They're invited out to the event and share their experience. But I was just curious, like one, like how often are these ambassadors posting your stories on your behalf? Kind of the frequency there. And what I think you're starting to touch on a little bit is, you know, are you creating content and then just asking them to share like, hey, here's this post, this reel that we made, can you share it? Or is the expectations more like just speak about your experience and they're creating their own kind of content?
Same kind of vein of depends on the event and also depends on the partner that we're working with, right? If there's like very specific language that partner organizations or collaborators want them to use, that's more of like brief territory where like this is the information or something that they're really not familiar with, of giving them like, hey, this is the language and about it on a brief. And if another thing I want to mention and not forget is to include collaborators' handles. So we share their handles so they can then amplify the collaborators as well. But if it's specific language, we'll definitely let them know like, hey, this is an example post. This is what we'd like you to share out. Again, like that National Forest Week, there's literally, you know, word for word like posts that they can share because that's the language. But some of them are also their experience. So we'll give them, hey, these are, you know, kind of the themes in this trip. and then take what you will with this and share what you learned and like how it made you feel, or like what, you know, you enjoyed most, that kind of thing. And then frequency, when we have a document where they agree to a set of commitments. So that's where we have, okay, you're going to post for every event, you're at least going to like make a story or make a post kind of thing. And they're required to attend a certain number of events every year to maintain their ambassador status.
And then on top of like the event posts and stuff, and the collaborations, I've also, just because in Instagram we have a group chat with them, I've just put in the group chat, hey, I put up this post, would you guys mind resharing it? Or, you know, here's some information, would you mind helping us get it out? And they're usually happy to do so.
Yeah, I'm curious when and I know you said you maybe weren't at the very beginning of this, but getting leadership comfortable with this type of engagement. I'm curious if you have advice about that, especially I think of our leadership, none of them are on social media and they're afraid of it because they don't know what's out there. And they just hear horror stories. They don't often see the positive or they don't experience any of like what social media can do. So how would you advise kind of working folks into this idea?
I think that's where metrics and like all of our annual reports are on the Sonoran Insiders website, which is sonoraninsiders.com. So you can show metrics from like our program to help support your point. For CASCA, at least, like Desert Botanical Garden, which is our host institution, has their own like social media stuff, but CASCA has its own. So we've already gone rogue. And adding in another one was just kind of like, oh, there's that other thing. I think it's much harder for the federal partners. And we do have Tonto's like public relations folk on the as partners with us, and they come to every meeting and stuff to make sure that we're meeting what they need in order to stay compliant.
Yeah, and thinking about starting what Shelly said, I would echo of like sharing this program as an example is great, and we're happy to share like any information that's helpful or like come talk to people. And we've also been very fortunate in the past year. We're a finalist for an Arizona Forward Environmental Excellence Award, and also we're just notified that we received an innovation award from the Forest Service, which was really cool. So being able to like share that and yeah, thank you, of like, hey, this is really cool, and it's like building recognition of how impactful it is. So the more, you know, we were kind of quiet at first about it because we didn't like want to lose it or like have people tell us that we couldn't. But you know, it's such a cool idea, and I think echoing that part of, hey, it's such a good way to get good information out there and combat the bad behavior, right? So if we want to share like what we want people to know, this is a great way to do that. Yeah.
And you can also like go to like the national park social media and pull their like just their like individual post metrics, and you can show that and be like, look at how many people are reacting, how many people are following, and their reach out into the world. And that you know, shows kind of for itself like how many people are paying attention.
Yeah, national parks is a good one.
They're so good.
And I know that's hard for like folks that don't speak social, or, you know, especially, you know, older folks that don't see the value in that. I think that's really powerful to be like, hey, look, like millions of people are listening to this.
Yeah, I had a question about money. We, in a group that I collaborate with, we had wanted to engage with an influencer to help spread the word about South Dakota's grasslands, and she wanted money, and it was actually quite a lot of money. It was a huge amount, and so we declined. We just want to be more organic in how we engage people, and so I wondered if that's come up and how you dealt with it, and whether these influencers are compensated in any way.
Yeah, good question. That's another part of the reaching out for recruitment. And that's a conversation. No, we didn't have funding. We have not had funding besides like partner money and what we could spare. Until we received this grant from state parks, and that's very specific for educational purposes. And we've talked a lot about like, could we provide stipends for travel? Because a lot of times like ambassadors are traveling a long ways. And again, we've been really lucky, I would say, about folks just really being passionate. And I think that plays into, again, conversations up front about like, hey, like we don't have funds. We just really are passionate about this. And like, if you want to be in this, like, please know, like, we don't have the monies. And that feels not great a lot of times to not be able to compensate the ambassadors. And that's another reason we put in wilderness first aid and the graduation packets into the field school, because in our minds, this was a really cool way to compensate the ambassadors for they're learning all of this stuff from us. So that's a big benefit. So that in itself, we feel like is worth something. And then getting them wilderness first aid certified, getting them field guides, packets of stuff. So that's been really nice to have grant money to be able to do that stuff. And we feel like we can finally give something sort of monetary back to ambassadors. But yeah, it's been really tough, and we've been, I think we've provided snacks and food and things like that for
We
people.
have, and we provide swag, like when we have a little bit of money in the operational budgets, like I got them passes to go visit DVG and the Desert Botanical Garden, and then like Tonto made them branded water bottles. And so we do specialized swag, but really the events and the access are their payments. And especially like they get to go to parks that aren't open to the public. And they get to go and do these really cool things that aren't available to anybody else. It also helps that all of them have day jobs and none of them are professional influencers on that level of like only doing that all the time.
That's a good point, in that we also talked a lot about, okay, do we have a minimum number of followers for the influencers to be able to accept it into the program? And what does that look like? And we decided not to. I think we might shift a little bit for the field school. But we had some ambassadors that had like 250 followers, and it's actually been really cool to see them gain more followers in the program. Because we were like, that's still valuable. So the one thing that we said was, okay, you have to have a public account at least, to be able to reach people. But like that set number of like minimum influencers, I think are not setting a minimum number of followers. Like Shally's saying, has been beneficial in that, our ambassadors aren't doing this for a living, which is great. And may not, look as much for that outrageous payment to be doing things. They just really like public lands and they're really passionate about it and want to be a part of it. So we're very lucky, but we try to do what we can when we can.
Yeah. And then for like, we've got a photographer influencer that like the platform is a part of her business too, because she's advertising her photographs. But this program helps her too, because it gets her access to places and good things.
I'm actually really curious about your metrics, and I know that you mentioned having like consistency in tracking those across the years with this has been difficult, and I would imagine some of that is really due to the algorithm changing and metrics track, like Meta changes how they track this stuff constantly. I guess I'm wondering like why you choose the metrics you choose now, and why that, like when you have multiple partners, multiple collaborators on a thing, how you kind of collate everybody's metrics to show that engagement and that progress.
Metrics has been such a struggle, and the reason for the consistent ones is what we've been able to at least backtrack or consistently look at that we've had. So like I can count the number of events that we've had, or I can count the number of followers, that kind of thing over time. But in the beginning, there was manual tracking of each influencer in spreadsheets of like when they would post, how many likes that post got, and you could do that cumulative like number crunching of like the actual reach of our account and their account together. which was really impressive, but also very time consuming. And also when that person was no longer there, like it got totally lost. So keeping up with things in that time of transition, like we were talking about earlier, but you know, that's so much work, and thankfully like Casco is able to bring in Hootsuite, and that's something we've been able to do analytics in Hootsuite every year since we've had that, to be able to compare a little bit more deeply on some of those analytics year to year. But things like, you know, how many partners attended events, how many ambassadors, and we've started to calculate volunteer hours. So that's something we can say of, hey, which is really helpful for Tonto National Forest to be able to show like, we had 391 volunteer hours this past year for events, like, and use that for, again, more evidence of why these programs are super impactful. But is there anything else you would add?
No, I think the biggest blow was like the people coming and going and not having that institutional memory passed anywhere. That really made it really, really hard.
Another thing with field school is like, from starting that, we get to kind of have a clean slate of like, okay, what metrics do we want to track with field school? So we're really excited to like talk about that and think, okay, like volunteer hours, number of things, you know, what does that look like? So that gives us a chance to kind of start over in a way and make sure we know the metrics that we're on track from here on out.
I was also gonna say that also opens us up to some fun metrics too, of things like the ambassadors could say, I, you know, educated this many people on a trail this year, and they can track things like that where we couldn't do that before.
Yeah, we did track how many apple snail eggs we switched, or bundles of them. So that's something that the Tonto keeps track of too.
No, that makes it so much more three-dimensional than just social media metrics too, to take into account. And that shows your like kind of on the ground reach. It seems much more meaningful to include that rather than relying on just like, you know, likes and shares and comments alone. So
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it feels kind of funky because that like reach and impact in the beginning was like 5 million, because we were like doing that number crunching, and now we're like 30K. So it feels kind of weird, but it's like more true numbers for us, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's been interesting.